Have you ever looked up at the sky and wondered, what exactly is a cloud? It looks so soft and fluffy, like a giant cotton ball floating up there. You might be surprised to learn that a cloud isn't made of one single thing, but a fascinating mix of ingredients that come together in a beautiful, natural process. Today, we're going to dive deep into the sky and uncover the secrets behind cloud formation. It's a story of water, air, and a little bit of dust. First, let's get the basics straight. A cloud is essentially a massive collection of three main components: tiny water droplets, tiny ice crystals, and the air that holds them all together. It's not a solid object you could touch, but more like a visible patch of atmosphere where water has decided to hang out for a while. The key to understanding clouds is knowing how these three things interact. So, what are the main ingredients in our cloud recipe? The most important one is something you can't even see: water vapor. Water vapor is just water in its gaseous form. It's all around us, all the time, in the air we breathe. After a hot shower, the steam you see is water vapor condensing back into visible droplets. The air in your bathroom was full of invisible water vapor. The same principle applies in the great outdoors, just on a much, much larger scale. But water vapor alone can't make a cloud. It needs a little bit of help. This is where our second ingredient comes in: tiny microscopic particles floating in the air. These can be anything from dust and pollen from plants to salt crystals from the ocean spray. Scientists have a cool name for them: condensation nuclei. Think of them as tiny little platforms or seeds. They are absolutely essential because water vapor needs a surface to grab onto before it can turn back into a liquid. Without these particles, clouds just wouldn't form. Now that we have our ingredients, water vapor and condensation nuclei, let's look at the recipe. How do these elements come together to create the magnificent clouds we see? It all starts with the sun. The process begins with evaporation. The sun's energy heats up the surface of the earth. It warms our oceans, lakes, rivers, and even the moisture in the soil and plants. This heat causes the liquid water to transform into invisible water vapor, which then mixes with the air. This warm, moist air is less dense and lighter than the cooler, drier air around it. And what does lighter air do? It rises. Imagine a hot air balloon. It rises because the air inside is warmer and lighter than the air outside. The same thing happens with pockets of warm, moist air. As this parcel of warm, moist air rises higher and higher into the atmosphere, it starts to cool down. You've probably noticed this if you've ever hiked up a tall mountain or looked out the window of an airplane. The higher you go, the colder it gets. This cooling is a critical step in our cloud recipe. As the air cools, its ability to hold onto water vapor decreases. Think of it like a sponge soaked with water. A warm sponge can hold a lot of water, but if you start to cool it down and squeeze it, the water will come out. This brings us to the magical moment of condensation. When the rising air cools to a specific temperature, known as the dew point, it becomes saturated. It simply can't hold all of its invisible water vapor anymore. The water vapor is forced to change its state from a gas back into a liquid. But remember, it needs a surface to do this, and that's where our condensation nuclei come into play. The water vapor condenses onto these tiny particles of dust, salt, and pollen that are floating around. And just like that, a cloud is born. Billions upon billions of these microscopic water droplets form around the condensation nuclei. Each droplet is incredibly tiny, far too small to see with the naked eye. But when they gather together in huge numbers, they become visible to us as a cloud. It is the collective power of these countless tiny droplets that creates the shapes and textures we admire in the sky. But what about those really high, wispy clouds? Or what happens on a very cold day? In these cases, the process is slightly different. If the rising air cools to a temperature that is below freezing, which is 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the water vapor doesn't turn into liquid droplets. Instead, it undergoes a process called deposition, where it transforms directly from a gas into a solid. It skips the liquid phase altogether and forms tiny, delicate ice crystals. These ice crystals then act as the building blocks for the cloud. They are often much more scattered and spread out than water droplets, which is why clouds made of ice crystals, like cirrus clouds, often look thin, feathery, and translucent. So when you look up and see a cloud, You're either looking at a massive collection of tiny liquid water droplets or a beautiful formation of tiny ice crystals, all suspended in the air. So, let's do a quick recap of the entire process. First, the sun heats the ground, causing water to evaporate and turn into invisible water vapor. Second, this warm, moist air is light, so it begins to rise up into the atmosphere. Third, as the air rises, it expands and cools down. Fourth, once it cools to the dew point, the water vapor condenses onto tiny particles like dust and salt, forming microscopic water droplets or ice crystals. Finally, when billions of these droplets or crystals cluster together, they form a visible cloud. It's a continuous dynamic cycle. Air is always moving, temperatures are always changing, and the amount of moisture in the atmosphere varies constantly. This is why clouds are always changing their shape, size, and location. They are a beautiful, visible indicator of the complex movements and processes happening in the atmosphere high above our heads. They are not just random puffs of white stuff. They are intricate weather systems in the making. Next time you're outside, take a moment to really look at the clouds. Think about the incredible journey that water had to take to get there. It started in an ocean or a lake, traveled invisibly up into the sky, and then came together with countless other molecules around a speck of dust to create something we can all see and appreciate. It's a reminder of how interconnected and amazing our planet's systems truly are. From a single drop of water to a vast, billowing cloud, it's one of nature's most impressive magic tricks. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the sky. If you found this fascinating and want to learn more about the wonders of our world, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos. See you next time.